Are you familiar with the link between the Twilight Zone and Emmett Till? And have you ever asked yourself, why is Oregon so white? Well, we're going to answer both of those questions here today. And if you would like to ask your own questions, you can do so at onemichistory.com at the contacts page. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so on my Buy Me Coffee, on my Patreon page, and descriptions below. You can give me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and support the YouTube channel. But without further ado, let's get started.
Are you struggling to conceive? You have options, and at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group, we'll make sure you have the guidance and support you need. PREG is known for individualized fertility care that's unique to every patient. We take the time to provide a reassuring and empowering experience because we believe that you deserve nothing less. Let us help you on your journey to parenthood. Visit us at pregonline.com to learn more. Get the guidance and support you need at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group.
Have you ever asked yourself, why is Oregon so white? Oregon's racial composition is heavily influenced by the implementation of 3 black exclusion laws during its early history. Prior to the state's admittance into the Union in 1859, Oregon fashioned itself as a white utopia. When it became a state, it was only one that explicitly forbid certain races from occupying, laboring, and possessing land within its boundaries. Although these laws were revoked, they were generally effective in preventing black people from inhabiting Oregon in its formidable years, and consequently, Oregon would develop into a primarily white state. In the 1840s and 50s, white settlers who came to the Oregon Territory were largely against slavery, yet many of them were against living in close proximity to black people. This was particularly due to fears that they would be used as competitors, as settlers were largely non-slaveholding farmers from places like Missouri and other border states that had already had difficulty competing against those that owned slaves. Furthermore, they were concerned that African Americans would conspire with native tribes and threaten their increasing settlement of that land. Despite this, a relative small number of black people did settle in Oregon during this time period, and a few immigrants from other states brought slaves with them, taking advantage of the lack of enforcement of anti-slavery laws in the area. In 1843, Oregon's small white population voted to incorporate the 1787 Northwestern Ordinance provision into its 1843 organic laws, prohibiting slavery and voluntary servitude in the territories unless the person had been convicted of a crime. The law was amended in 1844 and gave slave owners a limited amount of time to either remove their slaves or set them free if they refused to take action. According to Peter Burnett's Lash Law, those that failed to obey this order would be publicly flogged with no less than 20 and no more than 39 stripes. Peter Burnett stated that the purpose of this law was to keep clear of the most troublesome class of the population, black people. He believed that Oregon was in a unique position to avoid the same struggles with African Americans that the rest of the United States and other countries had endured. But because the lashing penalty was judged to be unduly harsh, it was rescinded by voters in 1845 before anyone could be actually punished. September 21st, 1849, the territorial legislature of Oregon passed the second exclusionary law, which prohibited any black American from entering or residing in Oregon, with the exception of individuals who were already present in the territory. This legislation was prompted by fear that African Americans would spread ideas of hostility among the native population towards white people. It was also abolished in 1854. November 7, 1857, delegates of Oregon's Constitutional Convention presented a proposal to legalize slavery and an exclusionary clause to its voters. The proposal to legalize slavery was overwhelmingly rejected, confirming Oregon's status as a free state. However, the exclusionary clause was agreed upon by a wide margin. It would be included in their Bill of Rights. This clause prohibited black individuals from entering the state of Oregon, owning property, or making contracts. As a result, Oregon became the only state to join the Union with an exclusionary clause in its constitution barring black people from living and working within the state. Later, several attempts were made by the Oregon legislature to pass some type of enforcement law for the exclusionary policies of African Americans in their state. In 1865, legislature would reject a proposal for a county-by-county census of blacks that would authorize county sheriffs to deport African Americans from their state. This was followed by the Senate committee killing off the final attempt of legislative enforcement in 1866. The clause would end up being rendered mute by the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, but it was not repealed by voters until 1926. These exclusionary laws, although generally not enforced, had a chilling effect on African Americans coming into the state. In 1860, the census reported that only 128 African Americans out of a total population of 52,000 lived in Oregon. According to estimates in the United States Census in 2019, the Oregon population is nearly 87% white, with the state black population only occupying 2%. And lastly today, we're going to talk about the link between Emmett Till and a Twilight Zone. You let me know what you think. Did you know that the Twilight Zone was inspired by Emmett Till? In August of 1955, Emmett Till was a young African-American boy from Chicago who was beaten, abducted, and unalived while visiting his family in Money, Mississippi. The aftermath divided the nation by race, and horrific images of his open casket funeral were circulated by Jet magazine, shocking the nation and sparking the beginnings of the Civil Rights Movement. Rod Serling at the time was a 30-year-old up-and-coming television writer and producer and was conscious to TV's potential for social good. He believed that writers had a duty to challenge their audience and reflect on issues of their time. Serling noted that the writer's role is to be a minister of the public's conscience. He must have a position and a point of view, and he must see the arts as a vehicle of social criticism. Off the backs of one of his most successful teleplays, Serling felt the urge to write a teleplay about racism and the unaliving of Emmett Till. However, advertisers and the networks feared the negative reaction from white Southerners, leading to rewrites and censorship of his work. Serling would later state that, from my experience, you can tell that a drama, at least in television, must tiptoe in agony lest it offend some serial buyer from some given state below the Mason-Dixon line. Ultimately, Rod Serling came to understand that it was difficult to confront issues such as racism and prejudice in the television power system. This inspired him to create his iconic anthology series, The Twilight Zone, where he could address social issues such as prejudice and bigotry, nuclear fears, and war through the use of metaphors and allegory. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy, and this has been One Mic History. I'm going to continue with this mini-series, and if you have questions or you just want to leave your comments, like I said, you can do so at onemichistory.com in the contact page. Thank you for listening, and peace.